I just want to say how thrilled I am and very warmed to see our lovely colleague, Cantor Deborah Katchko-Gray. I did say something about her earlier in the introduction, so some of you will have heard that. I don't want to take her thunder. She's very well known in many respects, not only for the work of herself, but her grandfather but this is a particular homage, if you like, to her teacher and friend, Elie Wiesel. So Debbie, you take it over. I can't explain what you can explain.
Thank you so much. I'll just start with a little bit of a recording. So that was a little bit of a recording that I'm going to share a lot more of in about a half an hour or so. I'm going to be speaking about my friendship and learning and study with Elie Wiesel. And Jay, we can share that in about a half an hour. Thank you so much. I just wanted to give a little bit of an introduction so you could hear the voice of Elie Wiesel and understand a little bit of the magic of this experience that I had. I'd like to begin with a foreword that Elie Wiesel wrote from a book, We Are Here, Songs of the Holocaust. He wrote, in Cheder, long, long ago, we learned, and then Moses sang. And so Moses, our teacher, and the children of Israel, while standing by the sea, began to sing. The soul of our people is in their song, more correctly, is their song. And he ends with, not because it is an obligation to cry, but because it is a duty to sing, because this is the way they taught us in Cheder, V'az Yashir Moshe, in the future tense, meaning not then did Moses sing, but then shall he sing. The secret of the Jewish song is found in this. Thanks to its past, it is tied to the future. Not many people know of the musical fervor of Elie Wiesel, and I'm going to be describing some of that in a little bit. In the foreword of We Are Here, we get a sense of his passion for music. So what drew me to Elie Wiesel's classroom, which really changed my life? Whenever I think about why I wanted to study with him, his influence and his spiritual nurturing just fills me once again. I grew up, as some of you may know, in a very Jewishly musical family with several generations of cantors, including cousins, uncles, my great-grandfather, Pinchas, my famous grandfather, Cantor Adolf Katchko, and my dear father, Cantor Theodore Katchko, all of blessed memory. And just a little visual, that is my grandfather, and that is my father. My mother was also an organist and a pianist who played for my father, and then later for me. She was my organist for many years. And, you know, as mothers and daughters, we were extremely close, and it was very funny because sometimes she would joke and say, you know, if you're not nice to me, I can change the key on you. And we used to have a big laugh at that because she was really in control. And I don't know if any of you were part of this era, but in the 1980s and 90s, the organ was often way up in a choir loft, and you only had a light or a bell to communicate. So there would be, green go, red stop. And, you didn't even have yellow like help. So it was kind of funny how we would communicate. And we had just such a closeness through the music. But it was really my mother who spoke every day about the horrors of the Holocaust and how the world abandoned us. She always said it was our responsibility to help one another because no one else will if we don't, and how important a strong Israel was for the Jewish people. I used to imagine I had family lost in the Holocaust, but I wasn't sure about it until many years later. When I saw documentaries like Night and Fog, I felt and imagined that my relatives were included with the victims, but I wasn't sure until genealogical research confirmed that over 70 members of the Katchko family alone perished in the Holocaust. If I researched all the branches of the family, that number would certainly be in the hundreds. I chose Boston University because I knew Elie Wiesel was going to teach there in 1976. I began in the fall of 1975. I was very active in the BU Hillel, and I sang in the coffee houses around Boston. And that's one of the reasons I chose BU, besides Elie Wiesel, was the number one choice, but number two was all the coffee houses and the folk music that I could enjoy. And the BU Hillel Rabbi Joe Pollack, heard me sing Bonnie Raitt and Joni Mitchell and Judy Collins and James Taylor. And for some reason, he thought I could do the conservative high holiday services because I really liked singing the blues. So I studied with him, and we made the cover of the Boston Globe because in 1976, a woman had never officiated at a traditional high holiday service in Boston. So that year was the year I also walked into Elie Wiesel's classroom, and my life changed forever. I wrote this in 1983. I'll never forget the first day of Professor Wiesel's class. We had to write on an index card why we wanted to take his class, as several hundred wanted to attend, and BU had to limit the number. Dear Professor Wiesel, with all his compassion, could not choose who would take and who would not. He had us write on a 3x5 index card why we wanted to take his class. And I wrote something like, I'm from a family of cantors from Poland, and I want to learn more about the experiences during the Holocaust. I want to teach Jewish children about our history and music and share my love of Jewish music. I remember him taking me aside and telling me that day, my door will always be open to you. And what he meant was I was welcome in all of his classes, and that opened up a whole new world to me. I took every single class he ever offered. I was allowed to register for one or two, and then I was sitting in on everything else. I made my schedule around his classes, and I soaked up as much as I could. Graduate level, even doctoral level classes were open to me with noted rabbis and scholars. I was a young woman with a passion for learning, and Professor Wiesel knew it and nurtured it. His classes opened my eyes and heart to learning in a new way. Holding a prayer book was now a holy act. I never saw it that way. Merely holding a prayer book was a privilege. It could save a soul, a life. Prayer can do that. It gives you faith and hope. All my years of Hebrew school and some day school, Jewish camping, I never heard anyone describe the act of holding a prayer book as a holy, sacred privilege. And that was the sacred, special magic of Elie Wiesel as a teacher. I discovered family in Israel who survived the Holocaust after doing research inspired by Elie Wiesel's classes. It turned out that my grandfather Adolf had two brothers who were also cantors and three sisters. One brother, Gershon, was a cantor in Yugoslavia. The other cantor, Yosef, was a cantor in Budapest or Debrecen, Hungary. He had three sisters, 21 singers in all, and over 70 perished. It would have been a huge family had Hitler not murdered them. It's not only the 6 million, it's all the families that were never created from them. It's hundreds of millions lost. That's why I see each Jew as a precious survivor and someone to carry on our traditions. Elie Wiesel's first book, Night, was rejected by many publishers. It is now a classic, as we all know, and is taught in schools all over the world, selling 400 to 500,000 copies each year. Wiesel was torn between silence and sharing the words from his experience. He did not want to speak about it for many years right after the war. It was too painful and too close to his heart. Even though he often says words are inadequate, his words in this powerful book plead with us not to forget. In 1994, he published his first volume of his memoirs, All Rivers Run to the Sea. I quote, "My intent here is not to repeat what I recounted in Night, but to review that testimony as I see it now. Was I explicit enough? Did I miss what was essential? Did I serve memory well? In fact, if I had to do it over again, I would change nothing in my deposition. Logically, I shouldn't have survived. Sickly, timid, fearful, lacking all resourcefulness, I never did anything to stay alive. I never volunteered for anything, never jostled anyone to get a tin of soup. I preferred to eat less rather than expose myself to beatings. I was less afraid of death than physical suffering. If anything motivated me, it was my father's presence. He was my support and my oxygen, as I was his. The SS wanted their victims to see them not as superior men, but as gods. They had all the rights, and we had none. They fed us or killed us on a whim, and we had not right to even look at them. But the faith that bound me to the God of Israel and of my ancestors remained immune to all that. It remained nearly intact." End of quote. His classroom became a safe sanctuary for students from every background and experience. Everyone's life experiences could find a home with Wiesel and a compassionate ear. Learning was done with compassion. There's always wonder and more questions. From his book, Jewish Literary and Moral Perspectives, how does one educate toward memory? Wiesel's answer is that listening to a witness makes a listener a witness. Quote, "In our tradition, anyone who teaches you something, a word, a sentence, a story, becomes your teacher. So I have many teachers. The Jewish tradition is a tradition of teaching. Disciples one day become teachers, and we are teachers because we are disciples. We are disciples because we know how to listen. My grandfather, Dodia Fag, is one of those no longer alive, and yet his teaching is alive because I am." End of quote. And I can say that about Elie Wiesel. Even though he is no longer alive, his teachings live on with us. We learned that listening to a witness makes a listener a witness. In his book, Conversations with Elie Wiesel, Harry James Cargus asked Wiesel about being a messenger. He asked, "Do you want to say something about the responsibility that you have taken on as a messenger?" And Elie Wiesel said, quote, "Not only I, but everyone who was there sooner or later, to a certain degree, feels that he or she was a messenger sent back. Why? I'll give you a practical example. Those of you who read Night may remember that the last week in Buchenwald was a difficult, despairing, senseless, absurd week. The Americans were coming closer, so the Germans decided to evacuate the camp. There were 80,000 people in the camp, and they were going to evacuate 10,000 every day. In the beginning, they started with the Jews, and then everybody. Most of those who left were killed, either on the way or on the trains, starved or shot. To leave meant death. For some reason that had nothing to do with me, because I am not a courageous person, I am not a person of initiative. I lived. I have never done anything to stay alive. I am not the type. I am not a sportsman. I am not strong. Logically, I should have been the first to die because I was always sick when I was a child, and I was always afraid of beatings. I didn't do anything, but really by chance. I'm not saying by miracle, because if it were to say miracle, that would mean that God performed a miracle for me and chose not to perform miracles for so many others. So I refuse the word miracle in this context. By chance, I always happened to be in the 11,000th. Sometimes I was maybe 30 to 40 people away from the gate, waiting for the gate. The gate was open, people were going, but they had to let out only 10,000, then they'd stop. And I'm often, very often, haunted by the person who was the 10,000th. And if I had been the 10,000th, maybe he would be sitting here in my place. So who is that 10,000th? This is really what I feel. Since I can't bring him back, I must try to speak for him. I cannot speak for all. I have no right to speak for all. No one has the right to speak for all. But for that unique young man whom I don't know, never knew, who simply left because he happened to be there, if somebody had pushed me forward, I would have run forward and I would have been the 10,000th. In this sense, I accept the term messenger. That means that I choose to be his messenger because he, I hope now, is my messenger. End of quote. Professor Wiesel asked us at the end of every course, what have you learned and what will you do with what you have learned? How have you changed? Who are you now that you have indeed received something from your teacher? Who are you now? Wiesel does something very rare. He gives his students permission to be transformed and to become teachers and leaders based on that transformation. I was transformed by his teaching, and I hope to share some of those lessons with you in hopes that you too will become changed and you will remember and apply these lessons to your own life and keep sharing them. The songs of Elie Wiesel. The musical side of Elie Wiesel is a window into a world of childhood memories, the majesty of Shabbat, and the Vizhnitzer Hasidic world he cherished all his life. I was so fortunate to experience this musical side several times over the 36 plus years of studying with him. Once he gave a lecture in Danbury, Connecticut, and the limo driver was arguing about his fee for a lengthy time. Now, if you remember the many years when Elie Wiesel would give lectures, it was standing room only, and it was a very special experience to be in that room. Often survivors would come. You had people of all ages, people from all walks of life, and we knew that we were in the presence of a very holy person, someone who had seen the worst that mankind can do, and yet came out being the best version of a human being you could ever want to meet. So now, Professor Wiesel is sitting in the limo after giving an amazing lecture, and so I walked over to him and I asked him if he had someplace he'd rather be. He said, my son is singing in a machila, a choir concert, and I want very much to be there. I offered him a ride, and he immediately left the limo, which I'm sure freaked out the limo driver, because that was his responsibility to take Wiesel. He left the limo and he went into my mother's car. You can imagine the shock and delight on my mother's face as she realized she was driving Elie Wiesel back to New York City. Somehow we started singing, and the hour-plus ride turned into one amazing sing-along of Hasidic melodies that he taught us from his childhood. It was magical and memorable. Another time, I went to Boston for a class, which I did every year after I graduated, because I just had to sit in a class with him as a teacher and soak up his wisdom at least once a year. After this class, my friend and I were outside and we noticed how foggy it was. It seems Professor Wiesel was stuck because his plane was canceled due to the fog. I saw him outside sitting in his driver's car. I asked him if he'd like a ride back to New York City since we were going that way, going to Connecticut. It's not that far to New York City, and who wouldn't go out of your way for Elie Wiesel? And he was so grateful. And so again, he came into our car and we sang most of the way. And this time it was 4 hours. What a treat. And then a few years later, in 1998, a special 3-day symposium was planned to celebrate his 70th birthday. I was honored to participate, and his wonderful assistant, Martha Hauptman, thought it would be a great idea for some of his devoted students and the presenters to gather in his office and have me lead a sing-along. Maybe he would join in. Cantor Ricky Levitz, Rabbi Ariel Berger, Professor Alan Rosen, Rabbi Nehemiah Polin were among the fortunate attendees of this special sing-along. Speakers, writers, presenters gathered and sat on the floor of his waiting room, and we started singing. A survivor asked me to sing a few Yiddish songs, so I started singing a Brivle der Mamen. Next thing, Professor Wiesel came out of his study and said, "Oi, you could wipe the floor with the tears from that song." And then he sat down and he started singing, and we joined in. And it was the most incredible experience any of us had experienced with Wiesel in such an intimate setting. It was a holy moment where the music flowed and the room was full of pure joy. No one wanted it to end. Rabbi Nehemiah Polin had a wonderful comment after a Hasidic song about the Baal Shem Tov, which we will sing shortly. He said, quote, "He's outside the door." Remarks like, "BU will never be the same," and "This is the highlight of my life." "I've never seen Wiesel sing like that," and "I will never forget this all my life," were some of the comments that were made. Thankfully, Ricky had a small tape recorder and recorded it all. Years later, I had it made into a CD in a studio where they cleaned up the sound a bit. I was thrilled to present it to Professor Wiesel in 2008 at his 80th birthday at BU, where I led a sing-along of a few of those songs. Not long after, Mati Lazar created a professional concert and a video of Professor Wiesel singing these songs with choir and instrumentation at the 92nd Street Y. For me, this simple recording that you will hear holds the meaning and magic of an incredible musical experience that no one will ever forget. I'd like to share some of these songs with you, sung by Elie Wiesel, that we sang as grateful students, international celebrities, authors, rabbis from the USA, Europe, Israel, Hasidic, liberal, Zionist, all singing with our teacher and mentor as one. The lessons learned in his classroom enriched my life in ways I could not have scripted. I was inspired to follow in my family's cantorial tradition after studying with him. I realized the miracle of Jewish survival must continue with each one of us. Elie Wiesel gave me a direction and a purpose I could not realize on my own. He taught us to light Shabbat candles, not only for yourself, but for one who is no more. Imagine not taking life for granted and not taking Jewish holidays for granted. This message changed my life and inspires me to this day. Professor Wiesel also never wanted to waste time, knowing how precious life is. There aren't enough hours in the day to do everything I set out to do each day, but I try. And I remember Professor Wiesel's dedication and devotion to his studies, his teaching, and his worldwide advocacy for a better world. His very first class was on the Holocaust and was never taught again. It was too painful for him. Somehow, the only record of his class are my class notes. And it has inspired me to write a book, Class Notes, A Lifetime of Learning with Elie Wiesel. I hope to find a publisher to help me make this a reality. Joel Rappel, his longtime archivist, drove down from Boston to retrieve my class notes for the Mugar Library, Elie Wiesel Archives, and many personal notes and memorabilia I saved over the years. We're now going to hear the authentic voice of Elie Wiesel of blessed memory. And I'd like to quote Rabbi Nehemiah Poland, and keep these words in mind when you hear these recordings. Rabbi Nehemiah Poland taught us, quote, when we hear the pre-war music, we hear nobility, sublimity, a gentle quiet, and understated grace. The first recording is the song Tsave, which we heard at the very beginning, and we can start sharing the words now. Feel free to sing along a little bit in your own muted way. Tsave, Tsave, Yeshua, Yaakov. Tsave, 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 Yeshua, Yaakov. If God is king, may he order that Israel be redeemed. What amazing words for someone who survived the Holocaust to sing, to have this song as part of his childhood, and believe that God can redeem Israel. It's hard to imagine how he processed that through his whole life, but we know through his writings that he dealt with that struggle. The next song, Fun Kosev bis Kitev, is truly amazing. It's a magical song. It talks about the Baal Shem Tov, founder of Hasidic movement. They used to travel between these two towns. And what did he do between these two towns? He would be walking. He found a little bridge. What did he do with that? By the bridge, he was spaziering. He just went for a stroll. And then the next verse talks about the Baal Shem Tov is taking a walk, and he finds a little stream. And what does he do? He immerses himself like a mikveh, toivin, which we also know is like koshering. So he basically immersed himself and koshered himself in this stream. And then there are other verses, but the third verse is unusual because it was not found in any songbook that I researched. And I believe that Elie Wiesel added this. And of course, as a cantor, I absolutely love this. The Baal Shem Tov is going between Kosev and Kitev. And what is he comes across a little shtibala, a little shul. And what does the Baal Shem Tov do? He's praying, he's davening. And a very sweet little refrain he also added, Oy vey Rebbeinu, which was not found in the original music as well, but perhaps this is something that was sung around his Shabbat table. And I find this song particularly magical. And it was after this song that Rabbi Nehemiah Poland said, he's outside the door. That this song brought the Baal Shem Tov right to the door of Elie Wiesel's office at BU because of the magic and the singing and this prayerful, really davening of this song. So listen to the magic of this song and he's meditating in the forest. Oy vey, revenue, oy vey, revenue, oy vey, revenue.
Zwischen Küssen Kossen
A little stream. He said he's outside the door. I love that. I love that. We were all we could do was sigh. It was so beautiful. And I love this too. Yaribon Olam, beautiful from Shabbat. This is something that I used to sing with my father. He always had a part-time pulpit, and I would stay with him when he had to drive to New Britain or Meriden, Connecticut for these little part-time pulpits he had. I think he was just, honestly had PTSD from having a very famous father as a chazan. He didn't want to be compared and to compete, but he was magnificent in his own way. And so we would often sing, Yaribon Olam Ve'omaya, Ve'omaya. We used to sing it a lot, and I played it for Professor Wiesel. We started singing it, and he tried to stop in the middle and do something different. But honestly, I didn't know what it was, and we just kept singing, and we should have stopped, because what he wanted to say was, Oy Tata Zisamelech. That was the tradition in singing Yaribon. Antu Malka, Oy Tata Zisamelech. Oh, sweet Father, sweet, our dear sweet Father King, Melech Malachaya. And years later, I met a Holocaust survivor cousin, Cantor Leopold Sneer of blessed memory, whose father was a first cousin to my grandfather, and their mothers were sisters in Kalisz, Poland. And he also sang it this way. And I was just so moved when I heard someone else sing it. I knew that this was a very important tradition and something that we should include and carry on. So let's hear it, and you can hear how we should have stopped and listened to what he was trying to teach us. Oh, 1 second. He starts talking and you're like, you should have stopped. teaching us a Vizhnitzer Yaribon next. Let's sing together. So beautiful, and you can hear his voice so clearly in that. And I just love the way he brings us back to the magic. I can imagine them singing it around a Shabbat table. And the final, well, not the final song, but amazing, the most amazing song, I believe, of all of these is Elie Wiesel's interpretation of Ani Ma'amin. He had his own interpretation from his Vizhnitzer childhood, and it was Rabbi Nehemiah Poland who said in this recording, you can hear him say, it was a Vizhnitzer melody from your childhood, and Professor Wiesel said, Ani Ma'amin. And at the end of him singing this, which is unbelievable, he says, that's the most beautiful song. I love the way, that's the most beautiful song. And after learning this from him and hearing him sing it, I always sing Ani Ma'amin, beginning with the Vizhnitzer melody from Elie Wiesel, and then adding the congregational one that we all know. And I think it works beautifully, and I think it's important to hear the sounds from his childhood and the sounds of his fervent belief in Ani Ma'amin. And you can hear this in his voice. I know it was recorded with him in concert, but I really believe that this raw recording of him singing without the pressure of a concert is very, very precious and very holy.
It was a
Vizhnitzer Nigun.
had been forgotten for many years.
שנתממתה
It's the most beautiful song, Ach. When I hear him singing that, it just makes me miss him so much. I wish we had anyone today who had half as much of his integrity and moral and spiritual leadership. There was no one else who could really speak to the whole world and be listened to like Elie Wiesel. And after that very emotional time, we got into some group singing a little bit. And imagine the joy of us singing to Professor Wiesel, Mi Ha'ish, who is one eager for life, who desires good fortune. Guard your tongue from evil, your lips from deceitful speech. Shun evil and do good. Seek integrity and pursue it. Who else deserves those words like that? And so this is a little bit of us singing to him. And the next one was a nigun that got just built into something. I love this. And here Wiesel leading us. It went on and on and on. At one point, Alan Rosen, who's a revered writer, scholar, teacher, you could hear him just taking off. And we always kind of were amazed that it was like Alan Rosen went off into space. He just took this nigun and he literally took off on a rocket. And he was leading it, and we just couldn't stop it. So I'm just going to save you from how long this wonderful nigun was. It was very special. If you ever want to hear the whole thing, I can send you the track and you can listen to it, but it was really amazing. I'd like to conclude with a recording that Elie Wiesel did with us at that wonderful magical sing-along. And it was Soll sein Shabbos, which we all know, but he added different words. Shabbos, jeden soll sein Shabbos, which we all have done, But he added Shalom, Shalom soll sein jeden Shalom. And I thought, how special for him to conclude with Shalom, obviously. So let's finish with this music, and then I just have a little to say. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and someone will relay them. I believe Jay will, but let's listen to this. Shabbos läuft der ganze Welt. Shabbos soll sein, Shabbos soll sein, Shabbos läuft der ganze Welt. Shabbos soll sein, jeden Shabbos. Shabbos soll sein, Shabbos soll sein, Shabbos läuft der ganze Welt. Shabbos soll sein, Shabbos soll sein, Shabbos läuft der ganze Welt. Listen. Shalom, 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 soll sein jeden Shalom. Shalom soll sein, Shalom soll sein, Shalom in der ganzen Welt. Shalom soll sein, Shalom soll sein, Shalom in der ganzen Welt. Elie Wiesel was the Nobel Peace Prize recipient in 1986. His musical legacy is also a legacy of spiritual action and of peace. The Nobel Committee said this about Elie Wiesel, quote, Wiesel is a messenger to mankind. His message is one of peace, atonement, and human dignity. His belief that the forces fighting evil in the world can be victorious is a hard-won belief, end of quote. May his voice and name always be a blessing and an inspiration. Amen. And now, if you have any questions, I am happy to answer them. And I want to thank everyone who's on here, who's participated. I hope you sang. I hope you got a feel for Professor Elie Wiesel, for his beautiful musicality and his spiritual singing and songs. And I always love being able to share it. So thank you for the opportunity to share. Jay, if you have any questions that have come through, or
I must say people must have been taking it in so much that the questions were not put down in writing, but I can see already a few hands up. I think
okay.
that they could unmute themselves and put the questions to Cantor Debbie.
Okay, Jalda.
Perhaps Tony wants to start. She was
Sure. Hi,
faster than
Tony.
me.
Hello, that was so soothing. And I was wondering, I think you had said that you would send people tracks. Is it also on YouTube or any place
Yes.
to hear his
on my
beautiful voice?
Yes, on my website, CantorDebbie.com. I have quite a few tracks from this recording.
Okay, fantastic. I
That's
just
probably
love
the
to.
best place to get it.
Great, thank you.
My pleasure.
Oh, and chat is disabled, just to say. Jay.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep.
So people can raise their hand.
You should still be able to message me, hopefully. But I'll
Okay.
look into it if you can't.
Okay, but I see little hands up, so you're able to put a little yellow hand in the corner. So I see Jalda.
Yeah, so I was sitting at our Shabbos table because Shabbos soll sein. My mom added always Yontev soll sein and
Oh,
Sholem
sweet.
soll sein. So
Oh,
the Sholem soll sein I knew also from my mama. and for sure von Kosev Beskitev, and she brought it always together with a different nigun, what I learned to know as the four-world Reb Nachem nigun. Yabai, 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 ya 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 ya. Von Kosev Beskitev. So I love this, to get different versions in different settings, and all of them were creative, because to connect it with unser revenue is also genius. And
I love
that. Just saying, I grew up in Europe, also with the shtickler of this music, what was kept alive through miracles. There's a story by Yitzhak Leib Peretz, Der Gilgul von a Nigun. It's the story of a nigun who was once famous and young, and then he grew older, and then the nigun passed away, and then suddenly the nigun is back. And what you are doing, and therefore I am so thankful, you are bringing back to us these nigunim, and that's what we have to do. And I'm so thankful for you that the listener is the listener and becomes a messenger. So if you go to teach us a nigun, and I teach this nigun to the next one, it becomes my nigun, and then becomes the nigun of the next one.
It's like what Wiesel said, if you listen to a survivor, in a way you become a survivor. His very last class at BU, just so you know, it's a very interesting story.
Right.
If you ever Google the name Elie Wiesel, there was a sickening website, a terrible Holocaust denying website that was called Elie Wiesel's Tattoo. I hope it's been taken down, but it's absolutely repulsive and disgusting and offensive. And the whole premise of this fake website is that to say that Elie Wiesel did not have a tattoo and did not survive the Holocaust, and made it sound like it was all a hoax. Repulsive. And Wiesel, never showed his tattoo to us, but at his last class, he made a point of lifting his shirt and showing the class his tattoo. And he said, now that you have seen this, you too are a survivor, and you have to tell the tale, because you are now a witness, and it's your obligation as a witness to this survivor to continue to tell the tale. Very interesting with the Oy vey revenue. I don't know if many people know, but Elie Wiesel was offered smicha several times. He studied Talmud 3 times a week at the Jewish Theological Seminary, regularly with great rabbinical teachers and friends, and he never accepted smicha. He certainly could have been a rabbi, but he had so much respect for the title, he didn't want the title. It was so interesting. He refused the smicha, even though he was the most masterful teacher of Midrash and Talmud, and just so knowledgeable. And I always think that's a very, very interesting fact about him, that he really was very humble. To me, he was a modern prophet, and a reluctant prophet at that, but there really is no one who had his voice and history and the message that came right through his eyes and his voice, just unbelievably powerful. Anybody else have any questions? And again, I thank you so much for listening and being part of this, and hopefully I'll be able to write my book one day.
I think Andrea has a question.
Yeah. I'm so moved. Can you see me? I don't.
Yes, hi Andrea.
I'm so moved by everything that you've shared and the way you've shared, and it just reminds me of my grandparents so much. But we're not a family who are very good at kind of holding on to or passing on these memories. And well, I've done everything I can, but I'm so connected to when you started singing, especially with the Yiddish. And I was just wondering if is there any like, is there any passing on of this happening, of your awareness? I mean, I suppose, is it something that you're involved with or aware of?
Absolutely. Well, it's kind of a little, mission of mine. I have been on Moment Magazine, Zoominars about this. I've spoken at Zamir Corral, Boston. I did a workshop on it. I'm honored to do a workshop here. The European Cantors Association invited me to their next conference. I'm hoping I can get there. I have a bar mitzvah on the weekend, but I'm hoping they'll find it worthwhile to bring me in for, 2 days of teaching. I would love to teach this, in Europe. But I want to do this as much as I can. I did it for a program and the Jewish Broadcasting Service. There's the National Jewish TV in America recorded it, and every year on Yom HaShoah they play it several times during the day. So if you Google it, you can find a similar talk to this with the same kind of recordings, and it can be shared. And if you're teaching, you can use that recording. It's like an hour-long program, but you're more than welcome to use it. And it's on JBS, Jewish Broadcasting Service TV. So I feel like it's at least preserved, and as long as I can, I want to share these things. I like to share them. If you're doing services, lead the nigun, lead Miha'ish, lead Zolzain Shabbos, and say where it came from. Every Yom HaShoah, sing the Elie Wiesel Ani Ma'amin, and then go into Ani Ma'amin. But you can always start with his Ani Ma'amin. It's just incredibly moving.
That's beautiful.
We should all just keep singing and using this music,
yes,
and sharing it. But you can find a recording of this as well.
Thank you so much.
And my website has a bunch of these recordings on it. So just happy to share it.
Oh,
Anybody else? Anyone else with a question? Yona, hi, my student.
Hi, yes, hi there.
Finland.
Hey, yeah, and that's what
Student, yay.
yes. I want to thank you so much, Cantor Debbie, because I knew already you were a blessing in my life, but now I know this is beyond, really. And I want to share a interesting story, because when I first started my PhD at the Åbo Academy here in Finland, my doctor father showed me the head of honor for the honor doctorate of Elie Wiesel.
Wow.
Yes, and he left it at the academy as a gift. He didn't want to have those kind of things, I think. But it's a very traditional thing. You get this kind of head, and you have a sword or a pen or something like this. It's very traditional. And he left it for the academy, and that was the first thing my doctor father showed me when I started my PhD. So I feel very blessed, to learn this. And since a few other Finnish people are on, I want to say that you teach me the Nusach in a literature tradition. And this is very important for all of us Finnish Jews who had this tradition for such a long time, and which is very important to us to keep it alive. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart, Debbie.
Thank you. Happy to. And just to say that I'm going to retire in 2 years, and then I'll be able to take on more students if anyone is interested in studying with me. I love teaching with EAJL, and I have a lot of materials that I love to share, including a lot of contemporary music and songs that open your heart, that are new spiritual sounds that I think are really worthwhile. I'm kind of a snob when it comes to music. I mean, obviously, being exposed to this kind of music and my grandfather's music, I like really good music. And when I hear things that are just kind of 3 chords, just, the words are kind of just shoved into them to make them fit, it doesn't mean anything, and you sound like you're trying to be a pseudo pop star, and you're not, and it just doesn't feel right, and some of it just sounds like Emperor's New Clothes to me. I always try and look for music that really gets to your kishkas. So that's one of the things I'm trying to stay current with, new stuff, but really good stuff.
Debbie, we heard you, and I'm sure we will send you more students. And thank you for being open to teach for the European Academy for Jewish Liturgy, because this Mechaye HaMetim, that's our task we have to do in Europe. where it will cost generations to rebuild. It's impossible to rebuild what is lost, but at least we can save the little stickelech. Here
Sure.
now somebody knows something,
Absolutely.
and here somebody knows something, and we have to put them together.
Right.
That's one
It's
of
a
our
train, it's a
tasks.
thread that we just keep adding to. And we can add new things too. But you know, let it be the kishka turning new things too, you know, good stuff. So anyway, thank you so much, and thank you for bringing me here. I look forward to studying with you, singing with you, and learning with you. And if anyone has any questions, or if you want music, if you want like something new that they feel like you want something amazing for your synagogue, you can just email me. I'm so happy to share and get good music out there. And of course, any of music of my grandfather, I'm happy to share any of Adolf Katchko music, great davening, classic. If anyone's doing Shabbat morning and you need help with Shachrit, I think his is the greatest, really, really the greatest. So let's keep those sounds going. Thank you so much. I know I probably didn't use all my time, but better leave them wanting more than too much. So thank you,
Debbie,
everybody.
I just want to add the hugest thanks on behalf of all of us at EAJL, because you are a blessing. And, you know, it's just such a privilege for us to have you with us and to learn at your feet. And
It's too sweet.
it's
Thank
just,
you, Jackie.
this has been the most wonderful session. I cried myself through the
Aw,
way through. So
thank you.
come back.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing me in all those years ago to EAJL. I'm very, very
Yes.
delighted. Thank you so much. Well, everyone stay cool. I hear you might have a heat wave in Europe. We have a bit of a heat wave here too. So everyone stay cool and healthy.